One of the most fun classes I've played in this game, the Mesmer brings the Illusionist to a brand new level in Guild Wars 2. In this guide, I'm going to cover everything you need to know to get started with the Mesmer. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Guild Wars 2 and Guild Wars Reforged content. The Mesmer is possibly one of the most unique classes in all MMORPGs. This is simply because of their capability of misdirection and illusion. Many of the Mesmer abilities spawn two types of illusions, either a phantasm or a clone. Phantasms spawn for certain abilities tied to weapon choices and usually perform a high damaging attack after they do. Once their specific attack has been completed, they disappear and then a clone appears. Clones are copies of the Mesmer and are meant to confuse enemies. They last for as long as they have health, their target is still alive, or if the Mesmer does not shatter them, which I will discuss that here in a moment. At any time, a Mesmer can have up to 3 clones, and honestly, given the multiple copies of yourself, dodging around with them is some of the most fun I've had in this game, especially in PvP. The Mesmer's profession mechanic is its shatter ability. Shatter skills provide damage, crowd control, or damage immunity for a time, depending on how many clones were shattered, scaling higher, of course, with the amount of clones used. Mind Rack deals instant strike damage to nearby enemies. Cry of Frustration deals some strike damage, but also applies confusion, a condition that deals damage over time, but deals high spike damage when an opponent uses a skill or an ability. Diversion dazes the target with increasing duration depending on the amount of clones shattered. The Daze crowd control prevents targets from using skills and abilities for a time, however, they can still move around. Distortion is a defensive skill that destroys your clones to give the Mesmer full damage immunity for a short time, increasing higher based off of the amount of clones shattered. Elite Specializations take this into completely unique ways, but I will cover that shortly. The Mesmer has quite a few weapons that they can utilize with their kits, each offering different ways to summon either clones or phantasms. Mesmers at a base can use a greatsword, a staff, a sword main hand and offhand, the scepter, the focus, offhand pistol, and the torch. Many of the skills for the Mesmer focus on movement, misdirection, and unique defenses like blocking, teleportation, or even stealth. The Mesmers also get new weapons when they learn their elite specializations tied to those expansions. For Heart of Thorns, the Chronomancers can be utilized as shield, which is more of a defensive-oriented weapon, however does provide some crowd control. For Path of Fire's Mirage, they can use an axe main hand, which is condition damage oriented. For the End of Dragons, Virtuosos can pick up the Dagger main hand and can deal heavy damage at a distance. With the Weapon Master training from the Secrets of the Obscure expansion, Mesmers can utilize all 3 of those elite specializations weapons without the need to own the expansion or having those classes unlocked. Later in the Secrets of the Obscure expansion, Mesmers can also earn the expanded weapon proficiency, which allows them to utilize a rifle, which acts as a long-range support weapon. Lastly, of course, tied to the Jantier Wilds expansion, all classes gain access to the Spear, which for the Mesmer is a primarily strike damage-oriented weapon and has a lot of mobility. Each of these weapons change the way the Mesmer plays, and it's all a great time, honestly. Greatsword is a laser beam. I mean, really, what more could you want? Mesmers have access to 5 unique utility skills that allow them to kit out for how they need to survive in combat. The Illusion skill type focuses on spawning clones or phantasm with, of course, other effects. Glamour is primarily oriented around area of effect on the ground and usually helps allies while hurting enemies. Manipulation skills are focused mainly on defense or escapes, dodge and evasion and misdirection. Usually good to have at least one of these on your bar. Mantras are like preparation skills. They must be charged before use, but after they are set, they can utilize multiple charges in quick succession. Lastly, Mesmers can use signet skills that have both passive and active effects. When they are activated, however, the passive effect goes on cooldown. The core specialization Traitlines for the Mesmer typically focus on what type of combatant the Mesmer wishes to be. They have access to domination, dueling, chaos, inspiration, and illusions. Domination has an emphasis on interrupting targets and disrupting enemies. Dueling has a heavy emphasis on critical hits and high strike damage. Chaos is more defensive, but provides some strong boons to allies and improves outgoing condition damage. Inspiration is more oriented around support and healing, while illusions are heavily focused on spawning more clones and improving the shatter capabilities. Now let's go ahead and talk about the elite specializations. For the Mesmers that foray into the Heart of Thorns expansions, they become Chronomancers. Their whole identity is being able to manipulate time, and as such, their shatter skills change. Mind Rack becomes split second, where it does the initial strike damage as normal, and then after a few moments deals that damage again. Cry of Frustration becomes Rewinder, where it shatters and applies confusion, but reduces the cooldown heavily for each clone shattered. Diversion becomes Time Sink, dazing the targets like normal, but then applying the condition slow, which causes all abilities to take longer to cast, movement is heavily slowed, and the animation speeds are slowed as well. Distortion stays the same, but then Chronomancers gain access to Continuum Split, which shatters clones and creates a rift. When the rift expires, the Chronomancer will come back to where they were when they activated it with the same health, endurance, and skill cooldowns from when they started. They can also activate this prematurely. This split lasts longer depending on the amount of clones shattered. As mentioned, Chronomancers gain access to the shield offhand, which blocks attacks for a time, but if damage was blocked, it can then use that skill again and block some more, as well as an AoE stun that moves forward, stops at a point, and then returns to the Chronomancer. They also gain access to Well skills, which are focused on being detrimental to enemies but providing some really good benefits and boons to allies. Their trait line focuses heavily on improving wells, their shatters, as well as applying the boon Alacrity, which reduces the cooldown of all skills while the boon is up. For Mesmers who enter into Path of Fire, they become Mirages, which augment the dodge roll ability into the Mirage Cloak, which provides the same damage immunity frames while allowing the Mirage to continue attacking without a break. The whole focus of the Mirage is their ability to duel enemies and confuse the heck out of them. When a Mirage uses Mirage Cloak, the dodge ability, they gain access to an ambush skill, which changes depending on the weapon they are using in their main hand, but is usually a much more powerful attack that can only be used for a short time after cloaking. Mirages also gain access to the Axe main hand, which is heavily oriented around applying conditions, as well as having a number of mobility and misdirection skills, allowing you to break your enemy's targeting, making them accidentally target one of your Mirages and more difficult for them to deal with you. Mirages also gain the ability to use deception skills, which allow you to dodge, shadow step, and evade enemies, while some skills spawn a Mirage Mirror, which will appear shortly after using that skill. The Mirage Mirror can then be stepped through by the Mirage, which instantly grants them the Mirage Cloak without having to dodge, which honestly is incredibly fun. And it also lets them use their ambush skill again. The Mirage trait line focuses on improving your sustain in combat, as well as having a heavy improvement to your outgoing condition damage. This is honestly my go-to class for the Mesmer. Absolutely love this one. Can't recommend it enough. For Mesmers who have entered into the End of Dragons, they become Virtuosos, which replace clones with floating daggers above their head. Their shatter skills become Blade Songs, which become stronger depending on the amount of daggers they have floating above them. Mind Rack becomes Blade Song Harmony, which shoots out all daggers at a target for heavy strike damage. Cry of Frustration becomes Blade Song Sorrow, which fires all blades that you have, inflicting conditions and dealing more condition damage depending on the amount of daggers used. Diversion becomes Blade Song Dissonance, which forms into a single massive blade and launches it at a target, dazing for however many daggers were used. Distortion now becomes Blade Song Distortion, which consumes all stock blades and grants additional distortion time for the amount used. New to the Virtuoso is Blade Turn Requiem, dealing pulsing damage to nearby enemies depending on the amount of daggers consumed. The Virtuoso, as mentioned, can use the dagger main hand, which allows it to deal great damage at a long distance by throwing daggers and blade storms at foes. Any weapon skills that summoned clones now instead add stocked blades to the Virtuoso. These unique dagger wielders now gain access to psionic skills, which allow them to deal great AoE, stock blades while being also immune to damage for a short time. And their trait line focuses on adding extra protection, increasing outgoing damage, as well as increasing the uptime of the boon Fury, which increases your critical strike chance. Lastly, for Visions of Eternity, Mesmers become Troubadours, which are more focused on support and benefiting allies with the power of phantasmal musical instruments. Troubadours no longer summon clones, but instead build notes when they use their appropriate skills. Their shatter skills become musical instruments, as well. After each musical shatter skill is used, the corresponding instrument will linger for a time, providing a buff, which the duration of that buff increases depending on how many notes were used. It'll also show you how long that buff's duration is above the shatter skill when you use it. Mind Rack becomes Lively Loot, which deals damage to enemies and heals allies, while also providing a buff that increases outgoing damage to the Troubadour and its allies, as well as the healing provided for each note consumed. Cry of Frustration becomes Flustering Flute, which deals damage and applies confusion while also dazing targets directly in front of the Troubadour. While the flute continues to play, it grants 25% endurance regeneration, lasting longer depending on the amount of notes used. Diversion becomes Deafening Drum, which damages and dazes enemies who are at a distance. For enemies who are close to the Troubadour, this instead becomes a stun. While the drum is playing, it grants 25% increased movement speed. Distortion becomes Harmonious Harp, which still grants distortion, but it also pulses healing to the Troubadour and its nearby allies, with more pulses depending on the amount of notes used. Troubadours also gain access to the Crescendo skill, which deals a heavy damage sonic wave that also applies barrier to allies that are within range. For each musical instrument playing at that time, the damage and barrier increases by 25%. With Visions of Eternity, unfortunately, there is no new weapon skills for the Troubadour to use. However, they do gain access to the Tales skill. Tales are told about famous or infamous people of Tyria's history, either granting boons, damaging enemies, or protecting allies. Uniquely, with each one of these skills, if the corresponding instrument is playing, they will grant additional notes upon use, such as the Tale of the Honorable Rogue. If used while the drum is playing, it will grant you 1 note. The trait line of the Troubadour focuses on a variety of build focuses. The Mesmer has a lot of unique variety to play with, and without a doubt has always been one of my favorite classes to play in this game. I have mentioned a number of times that if I didn't play the Elementalist, I would certainly be playing the Mesmer as my main class. If you like illusions, misdirections, and dominating enemies, this is 100% the class for you. If you are interested in learning more about the Elementalist, my main class, you can click this video here. Otherwise, stay caffeinated, folks.